How did it become like this? Could it be that there really was some plot? Murong and I shook her head as she tried hard not to let her mind wander. No, it shouldn't be like that. She coincidentally read on this historical array and she would definitely be able to decode it successfully. Lang Yifeng urged, since you know the way, then hurry and start decoding it. We can save more time and enter the cave dwelling earlier. Murong and I had no time to let her thoughts wander as she only nodded, moving upwards in a hurry. Decoding an array was a complicated piece of work and rough judgment to decode was one thing. But when they really started to work on it, it was another thing. Even though she had read the relative records on the ancient manuals and knew the decoding train of thought, but it still required a huge amount of calculation and deduction. Murong and I held on to the array board as she went round the cave dwelling's outer walls numerous times as her forehead creased tightly, uttering to herself. After spending close to 2 hours, she finally drew out a piece of brick from the surrounding walls, shifting it to some other location. Following Murong's action, the entire cave dwelling flashed another bright light, so bright that it pierced everyone's gazes. Feng Xiaoning was feeling joyful. How is it? Is the array considered to be decoded? Murong and I shook her head. Not yet, it's still too early. This is just 1/10. Feng Xiaoning's face turned black as he didn't imagine that decoding an array was such a troublesome matter and wasted so much time. Lang Yifeng had once seen array masters decoding arrays and knew what Murong and I said wasn't wrong as he hurriedly stopped Feng Xiaoning. All right, you quieten down a little and stop bothering Miss Murong from decoding the array. Just like that, Murong and I spent a long time deducing continuously as her face started to turn paler and paler. Because the more she deduced, she realized that the complexity of this array had far surpassed her calculations and every single time she decoded a step, the next step was an even harsher and undecodable situation which she had to face, and very soon it started to exhaust her concentration. In the end, she finally could not hold on as her head suddenly felt dizzy and was about to fall. How is it? Have you finally decoded it all? How much time more? Feng Xiaoning had completely lost his patience. Lang Yifeng also felt that Murong's condition wasn't quite right as he started to look impatient as well. Miss Murong, what's the current situation now? You're the one who said it yourself that this array was simple and you would definitely be able to decode it. Are you intentionally dragging the time to fool with us? Anyone could tell the threat in his tone and Murong and I naturally knew it even more clearly. She quivered as she felt a chill, suddenly regaining some consciousness. That was it, if she really couldn't decode the array, then would she really become the object of despise to the two sects? She had already betrayed Celestial Light's sect, so if Green Cloud's sect were to not want her then she would really be finished. Murong and I was feeling extremely anxious and had no way to quieten down her heart to think carefully. She had already made so many mistakes in her own deduction and yet she had not detected it at all. Finally, she forcibly came out with a conclusion. Murong and I didn't have the time to carefully think if the answer was right or wrong as she stretched out her hand on the wall, lifting up the last brick. A loud boom reverberated. Instantly the entire cave dwelling's exterior was enveloped by circles of blue light, and in this blue ray of light, the cave dwelling's entrance opened up on the two sides. But the main entrance had not opened up completely, only separating slightly, as it revealed an entry which only allowed one person to pass through at a time. You can also listen on. When Murong and I saw this, she was so excited beyond herself. She simply couldn't believe that she really did it. She actually decoded this historical array. She had not expected that her last action without taking time to think through carefully actually let her hit the first prize, gaining success in one shot. Lang Yifeng and Feng Xiaoning exchanged glances as they revealed an overjoyed expression. You're truly a rare array skill talent which can only be found once in every few centuries, even such an advanced historical array can't stop you. You're just too incredible. It's Green Cloud Sect's honor to have been able to invite second Miss Murong to join our team. Green Cloud Sect's disciples were all feeling pleasantly surprised. On the other hand, Celestial Light Sect's side was filled with sorrow as each one of them felt extremely frustrated. Murong and I saw their expressions and felt even more complacent. HMPF, how dare they belittle this young miss, how was it now? Feeling regret. But, it's all too late. She was just about to say something to taunt them so as to gain back her face, but Feng Xiaoning gave her a gentle push on her back. You can say whatever you want later, we have to grab hold of time and enter quickly. Murong and I raised her head as her eyes met Feng Xiaoning's gaze, immediately understanding what he meant. That's right, now was the most crucial time of all and every second counted. The entrance of the cave dwelling was only that big and that meant that the first batch of people who went in couldn't be that many. Whoever went in first would have a longer duration to seek the treasures. Don't think that the two sects had agreed earlier on distributing the treasures equally, but the minute they really enter the cave dwelling, who would be so silly as to hand out the things which they have taken, and wait for equal distribution? How could that be possible? Of course it belonged to whoever had grabbed it first. Because of that, the most important thing now was to hurry in and grab the treasure. Murong and I regained her senses as she couldn't care less about taunting Huang Yueli as she turned around and dashed towards the entrance of the cave, swelling at the first chance. Green Cloud Sect's people were originally nearer to the entrance of the cave dwelling, and now under Lang Yifeng's commands, all of them ran into the cave dwelling, striving to be the first and fearing to be the last. Celestial Light Sect's disciples had not expected them to be so sinister, and originally they had yet to react. So by the time they realized that Green Cloud Sect's people had played dirty and wanted to rush over, but it was all too late. A large half of Green Cloud Sect's disciples had already entered in, and the rest of them, under Lang Fengyi's incitation, had blocked the cave dwelling's entrance. The entrance was only this wide, and it was tough for two people to squeeze in simultaneously. Celestial Light Sect's people were blocked on the outside, so it was impossible to cut the queue to enter. Luo Jiyun's face turned totally black as he cried out, flustered and exasperated, "Feng Xiaoning, your Green Cloud sect is really shameless. You actually disregarded the agreement and snatched the chance to run in." Feng Xiaoning laughed heartily. Since when had we gone back on the agreement? Mr. Luo, please touch your conscience when you speak. Our original agreement didn't mention who went in first or last, so your Celestial Light sect can also enter first if you wanted to, isn't it? Isn't it all because your actions are too slow? Luo Jiyun almost fainted from hearing that. Too despicable, too shameless. Green Cloud sect is also a large sect, so how could there be such despicable disciples like you guys? What despicable? This is called relying on your own skill. Talking to me about virtues in front of treasures. You look like you're not very young, but how could you be so naive? Feng Xiaoning gave a cold laugh several times, and on seeing that most of his comrades had already entered in, as he hurriedly joined in as well. You can also listen on. Luo Jiyun was really infuriated as he shot upwards and wanted to chase after Feng Xiaoning tightly towards the cave dwelling to stop them. But he had just started moving when a figure dashed out from the side, blocking right in front of him. Junior brother Luo, what's the hurry? Keep calm and don't get too excited. Luo Jiyun lifted up his head to realize that it was Huang Yueli, as he could only stop in his tracks. But the anxiousness in his heart had not reduced. Little sister-in-law, it's already come to this, so please stop blocking me. Haven't you seen it for yourself? Those shameless fellows from Green Cloud sect actually didn't keep to their promise and intentionally entered before us. What shall we do if they snatched the treasures first? Actually, all of the other disciples were burning with anxiety, and upon hearing that, they immediately started to echo the same thing. That's right, junior sister Bai, we have to hurry and enter as well. Although there's a lot of treasures in the cave dwelling, but they would definitely take whatever they see, so if we're slow, there'd be nothing left. That's right, Green Cloud's sex bunch of wretched people are simply too sinister. Junior sister Bai, you shouldn't have agreed to split the treasures with them equally earlier. They are totally up to no good. All of them were extremely worried, and if it hadn't been for Huang Yueli to stop them on their way, they were itching to rush in. The minute they thought of the rare treasure in the cave dwelling falling into the hands of Green Cloud's sept, that made everyone filled with irreconciliation. However, Huang Yueli was totally not influenced by them, as her delicate little face did not show a single bit of urgency. Instead, her lips curled up as she laughed softly. Senior brothers and senior sisters, I've already said this earlier, keep calm and don't get too excited, relax, the real rare treasure isn't something which the fastest person can get. Moreover speaking, how do you know that Green Cloud's sex people had really entered the correct cave dwelling and not a trap? Everyone was stunned. Trap? What do you mean? Just as everyone was bearing a blank look, a loud shocking explosion was suddenly heard from the cave dwelling's direction. Boom! The ground vibrated vigorously and black smoke started to surge out from the cave dwelling's top. Miserable screams were heard, and following the bubbling airflow, Green Cloud's sex disciples who had rushed over to the cave dwelling were all thrown out. The explosion was just too intense, and although Huang Yueli was a distance away from the cave dwelling, she could feel the aftermath of the explosion charging towards her from her back. She wasn't able to evade in time as her small face turned slightly pale. Damn it! She had not expected that they were still too near. If she had known earlier, she would not be nosy and came out personally to stop them. Just as Huang Yueli thought that she would really be injured, a black image flashed by. A strong arm hooked onto her waist and pulling at her, he drew her to one side as he successfully saved her right before the airflow struck her. Huang Yueli rested into Li Moying's arms as she was still in a panicked state. Mo. Moying, luckily you're here. The large palm which grabbed her slender waist suddenly tightened as he heard the young lady's pained cries, and he berated her in a bad mood. So stupid, why were you standing in such a dangerous place for? Did you really think that you were still in the 9th stage realm? Huang Yueli buried her face onto his chest, rubbing him as she acted as though nothing happened. Boo-hoo, you're so fierce. I'm so scared, yet you're still scolding me. You can also listen on. The corners of Li Moying's lips kept twitching as it was obvious that this lass was faking it, but he was still stirred up by her soft cries of pain as he felt his heart ache. What's the matter? Let me take a look. Are you injured? Saying that, he didn't wait for Huang Yueli to reply as his palm started to pat her from top to bottom as he checked her body to see if she had sustained any injuries. Huang Yueli's face flushed red immediately. This man really didn't bother about the current situation. They were in public and he actually did this. She hurriedly pushed him away. Nothing, I'm fine. Just merely had a shock. All right, let go of me. So many people are looking at us. Li Moying suffered some domestic violence punches from her and forcibly stopped. But he wasn't very assured as he frowned and stared at Huang Yueli. Really all right? If you're injured, you must tell me, you're not allowed to hide it from me. Huang Yueli nodded her head earnestly to guarantee, I'm really fine. Rest assured. Li Moying then heaved a sigh of relief as the huge arm on her waist didn't shift away. It merely relaxed a little, but he still locked her in his arms. Huang Yueli struggled for a while and stopped, only pouting her lips allowing him to do as he wished. Li Moying turned around and looked towards the direction of the cave dwelling. Right now, the exploding sound had stopped and the black smoke above the cave had dissipated by a large amount. Earlier there was such an intense tremor which could be described as earth shaking and mountain swaying. The several thousand-year-old trees nearby had all fallen onto the ground, but this luxurious beautiful cave dwelling remained standing and motionless, without even a crack on the walls. It seemed as though nothing had happened earlier. But the surrounding walls of the cave dwelling were Green Cloud's sex disciples who had fallen everywhere. All of them without any exception had all been expelled from the cave dwelling. Moreover, because of that earlier explosion, all of them had sustained heavy injuries as they laid limp on the ground, unable to climb up at all. Celestial Light Sect's disciples crowded around them as they discussed with shock. What happened? Hadn't they entered the cave dwelling successfully earlier? Why did they get expelled out? Do you even need to think? It must be because the array had not been decoded and that entrance was just a trap, so they all fell for it. That's right, who asked them to be so complacent earlier? How about now? It's so hilarious. Celestial Light Sect's disciples were all rocking with laughter as they all heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time they were also terrified at the bottom of their hearts. Luckily, we didn't enter. Otherwise we will end up the same as them. Right, earlier I almost chased after them to run it, luckily Junior Sister Bite stopped us. Wait, does that mean that she had already seen through something? Makes sense, otherwise why would she purposely stop us? But isn't that too ridiculous? Murong and I can't even decode the historical array, so how could she possibly find out the secret behind this? Probably just coincidence. The crowd looked at each other in dismay as they felt that there was more to it that meets the eye. Huang Yueli had once again saved everyone in Celestial Light Sect, and this was something which all of them acknowledged. But how did she save them? This was what made all of them unable to comprehend. Surely it couldn't be that her level of mastery in array skills was stronger than Murong and I, right? This simply could not be justified because Murong and I was a publicly acknowledged #1 array skills talent in South Sky region. Since young there had been many famous array masters who appreciated her innate talent and were snatching to take her in as their disciple. You can also listen on. How could Huang Yueli possibly be more talented than Murong and I? Her armament refining skills and cultivation innate talent was already so strong, and if she really had that high level of mastery in array skills, how would anyone else be able to live? Just at this moment, those disciples from Green Cloud sect who had fainted all started to regain their consciousness. Lang Yifeng's cultivation was the highest and he was the first to regain consciousness. The minute he opened his eyes, he discovered that he was lying on the ground and was not able to go into shock when he felt a wave of intense pain emitting into his brain cells. His internal organs seemed to have shifted places, which made him go into so much pain that he could only moan out loudly. What is going on? Shouldn't he already be in the cave dwelling selecting the treasures? He still remembered that the moment right before he lost consciousness, he had discovered a large quantity of 8th tier and above profound armaments as he was so excited and was indecisive on which one to select, but in the end. His memories immediately returned to him as Lang Yifeng recalled that sudden explosion as his expression turned extremely gloomy. Feng Xiaoning had also regained consciousness and he turned his head back blankly. Upon meeting Lang Fengyi's gaze, he immediately understood what happened. Damn! Looks like the array had not been decoded. We have all been tricked by that wretched slut Murong and I. It was exactly because he was the last few to enter, hence his injury was not as serious and he could still forcibly stand up. Feng Xiaoning walked to Murong and I, who was still unconscious, as he grabbed her collar and shook her vigorously. Murong and I, still pretending to be dead. Get up right now. Wake up. Murong and I awoke in dizziness as there was a complete blank on her face, followed by a sharp cry of pain. Arg, it's so painful, ugh, why can't I move? What happened? Feng Xiaoning was extremely upset as he gave her a tight slap. Immediately Murong Ni's face became swollen as the corners of her lips flowed out blood, totally dazed from the slap. Feng Xiaoning berated her in exasperation. What happened? You still have the cheek to ask. Didn't you say that you're sure that you can decode the array? Wasn't it you who said you succeeded? Why is it that so many of us have entered the cave dwelling but we were all expelled out and all of us sustained such heavy injuries? What? How could that be possible? Murong and I was stunned as she slowly recalled the situation at that time while her complexion started to turn paler and paler. At the end, she had completely lost all colors of blood. Recalling the entire process of development, how could Murong and I still not understand? She was just feeling that her luck was simply too good as she simply just drew any piece of brick which decoded the array. But as she was too excited, she had not thought of the possibility of a trap appearing. Right now recalling that, she had not decoded the array successfully, but instead, she was misled. Not only had she not brought Green Cloud sex people into the cave dwelling, she had caused them to suffer a huge loss. Feng Xiaoning laughed coldly, "Aren't you the one who made yourself out to be so incredible? Aren't you nicknamed South Sky Region's #1 array skill talent? This is your potential. It's simply a joke. No wonder Li Moying wasn't willing to bring you along because you're basically just a scammer. Whoever brought you along will get into bad luck." Murong and I heard that and immediately forgot the pain on her body as she anxiously tried to explain for herself. "Feng. Mr. Feng, this is merely an accident. One word accident and you caused so many of my Green Cloud sex people to suffer such a terrible state, you still have the cheek to say so. You sure you're not a spy sent over by Celestial Light Sect?" I'm not, how could I possibly be a spy? Murong and I shook her head vehemently in denial. You can also listen on. However, Feng Xiaoning had no mood to continue listening to her. All he knew was trusting Murong and I was the gravest mistake that he had made. Just because of Murong's boasting, it caused so many Green Cloud sex disciples to sustain such heavy injury and losses. One must know that Green Cloud sect's top-rated battle power had all entered the cloudy Qilin Mystic region this time round, and after the explosion in the Mystic region, many of them had sustained a very serious injury which needed at least 10 days to half a month in order for them to recuperate. But this was the cloudy Qilin Mystic region. Danger lurked all around the ancient Mystic region and they had to face various dangers every day, so where would they find the luxury of the time to rest and recuperate? Even if they were able to find a safe spot to make slight adjustments, but they were only in the cloudy Qilin Mystic region for a month. Now that there's only 10 over days left, surely it could not be that they were going to spend the last 10 over days to recuperate. This was a total waste of their opportunity in entering the ancient Mystic region for experience training. Needless to say, there were many Celestial Light Sect's disciples who were keeping a watchful eye on them, just waiting for them to run into bad luck. This time round, Green Cloud Sect's top experts were all injured whereas Celestial Light Sect's people were all perfectly fine. Thinking of this, Feng Xiaoning suddenly jolted as he turned around. He saw Huang Yueli and Li Moying standing side by side not too far away, and Li Moying's hand was placed on his fiancée's waist as the both of them had an unruffled expression, occasionally casting glances at them as though they were watching a huge joke. Feng Xiaoning was so infuriated that he almost fainted. Ling Yifeng was also extremely upset because he was the one who led Green Cloud Sect's disciples in. Now that so many of Green Cloud Sect's disciples were seriously injured, he had to bear the responsibility for it. Ling Yifeng's gaze fell upon Murong and I as anger arose from all directions. Murong and I, you're indeed the spy sent over from Celestial Light Sect. You've caused us so much harm to Green Cloud Sect, so I will absolutely not let you off. All the disciples from Green Cloud Sect will not let you off. Murong and I suddenly had a change of colors. I really didn't do it intentionally, I really didn't, but no one believed her. Or perhaps it could be said that it wasn't important if she was a spy or not. Green Cloud Sect had suffered such a huge loss, so all the disciples were bearing fire inside, as they needed to vent out on someone. Murong and I originally wasn't part of their sect, and now that she was the main culprit in creating this mess, she naturally became the object of everyone's fury. Sensing the vengeful gazes radiating from all around her, Murong's body turned icy cold. Right now, she finally felt extremely remorseful. Why did she go rely on Green Cloud's sect? Green Cloud's sect's people were obviously using her, and the minute she was of no more use, they immediately turned their backs on her. Murong and I had no other way but to look towards Li Moying as she begged mercifully, "Eldest senior brother, I beg you, please save me. I know I'm in the wrong, and I promise I will never betray the sect in future. Please, on account of my father, please save me. Otherwise Green Cloud sect's people will definitely torture me to death. Eldest senior brother." Li Moying's eyes flashed a cold glint. He had not spoken out when the ordinary disciples from Celestial Light sect already started to cry out in fury. "Young sect master, please don't be soft-hearted and forgive her. That's right, Murong and I is simply too shameless. Earlier she claimed loudly that she will stand on Green Cloud sect's side, and now that she can't continue staying there, she wants to return to Celestial Light sect. You can also listen on." That's right, it's impossible for such a good thing to happen under the heavens. Did she think that we're all fools or what? Young sect master, you're so brilliant and wide, surely you will not fall for this slut's trick, right? Murong and I betrayed her own sect and almost helped Green Cloud sect to snatch away the treasure in the cave dwelling. These acts had already made Celestial Light sect's disciples hated her to the core. Even if she was sect master Murong's biological daughter, no one was willing to forgive her. Murong and I was stuck in between a rock and a hard place as she was so anxious that her tears kept flowing, entreating piteously, "Eldest senior brother, I really realized my mistake, please give me another chance. By Ruoli, I've already been tricked by you to such a miserable state, are you still unwilling to let me off?" Huang Yueli looked extremely innocent as she replied, "I trick you? Since when had I tricked you? It was obviously your team members who pushed you out to decode the array, and I'd also given you a chance on accord that we were from the same sect, specially giving up the chance to you. But your mastery in array skills is just too bad, so who can you bomb?" But Murong and I was unable to give a convincing explanation to defend herself, but she subconsciously sensed that today's matter definitely had something to do with Huang Yueli. But she didn't know how Huang Yueli managed to scheme her. Could it be that she really saw through this historical array? Moreover, she intentionally dug a pit for her to jump in along the way. Wasn't the difficulty just too high? The last time when they were in the Dark Moon Forest, Huang Yueli was merely a first-stage realm practitioner, and due to cultivation restrictions, she could only come out with the standard of a second or third rank array master. So Murong and I always had the wrong impression that Huang Yueli's array skills were on par with hers, and even if she was slightly better at it, there was a limit to it. Hence she thought that if she herself was not able to see through the array, Huang Yueli would naturally not be able to do so as well. Huang Yueli didn't explain further as her lips curled, showing a friendly attitude. "All right, Mr. Lang, I'm sure both of you still remember our previous agreement, right? If Murong and I was able to decode the array and prove her value, then we will split the treasures with you equally." Now that she had failed in the challenge, so there's no point in the cooperation between us right now. We won't cooperate with weaklings, so please hurry up and leave right now. She was so quick to issue the marching off orders, which made Green Cloud sect's disciples both embarrassed and discomfited. The party which was chased off like dogs due to inability was actually something which was happening every day in Soaring Heavens continent. But as West Sky region's #1 sect's disciples, this was the first time many of them had suffered such humiliation. Usually, they were the ones who chased other people away. Lang Yifeng's expression was especially discomfited. To be seen in such a silly sight in front of the lady he liked and his love rival really was much worse than killing him. He was really not resigned to it, as he had not nudged at all. Li Moying spoke out icily, "Why? Still trying to renege on here? Do you really want me to chase you all off personally? Not that it's impossible, but I'm afraid that you won't be able to take it." Everyone shivered all over. Ling Yifeng asked with much difficulty, young sect masterly, don't be like that. If a talented array master like Murong and I isn't able to decode the array, then the only way to enter would definitely be by brute force to decode the array. At this kind of timing, one more person means one more battle power, so you will still need us. Isn't it too early for you to say to not cooperate right now? Li Moying casted a glance at him as he replied coldly, who told you that? I'm using brute force to decode the array. You can also listen on. Ling Yifeng had totally not expected him to give this reply as he immediately went into a daze. These words, what do you mean? Everyone present stared at him in astonishment. Li Moying lowered his head as he looked at his fiancée in his arms as he asked softly, Lear, can you decode the array now? Or do you want to take a break first? His gaze and tone was extremely gentle, as though he had changed from an icy, emotionless top expert into a gentle and caring lover in a split second. Even Huang Yueli was dazed by his bewitching peach blossom eyes, feeling that she was going to be bewitched by this man. She shook her head, no need. Earlier we've already watched such a long show, so if I still don't move, my body will start to rot. Saying that, she pushed Li Moying aside gently as she walked towards the cave dwelling's entrance directly. Green Cloud's sex disciples all started to tremble when they heard what she said. So they had excitedly ran into the array, assuming that they had gained a huge advantage, but in Huang Yueli's eyes, it was a monkey show. HMPF, this Bai Ruoli is just too arrogant. She thinks that she has Li Moying behind her and no one dares to ruffle her feathers. Wait a minute, why did she walk towards the cave dwelling's entrance? Could she be trying to decode the array? What joke is that? She wants to decode the array. You must have seen wrongly. Bai Ruoli isn't even an array master. But she really walked over. Under everyone's astonished gaze, Huang Yueli walked to the cave-dwelling entrance. She raised her head and looked around, almost without any hesitation, as she stretched out her hand and drew out a piece of brick from the wall. What is she doing? The crowd looked at each other in dismay, with a dazed look on their faces. From her stance, it bore some similarities to what Murong and I was doing earlier, like she was decoding the array. But if this was true, shouldn't she be observing carefully around the surrounding walls first? How was it possible for her to just take out one piece of brick immediately? Earlier even the array skill talent Murong and I observed for 2 hours before she made a move. Luo Jiyun saw Fang Xiaoning's shocked look as he couldn't help but laugh coldly, such ignorance. Little sister-in-law is just decoding the array. Decode the array. How is this possible? This is a historical array which had been around for several thousand years and she just made a move without taking a careful look. Heaven knows what the consequence will be. Perhaps it might be even more terrifying than the explosion earlier. Fang Xiaoning totally didn't believe his words. Luo Jiyun gave a cold laugh, such lack of knowledge. In front of a true blue array skill talent, what is a historical array? Array skill talent. You're referring to Bai Ruoli. Isn't she an armament master? How did she turn into an array master? Luo Jiyun replied disapprovingly, very strange eh? Little sister-in-law is exactly this kind of genius. But, no, this is impossible, you're confusing me. Fang Xiaoning still refused to believe because this was simply out of his imagination. Luo Jiyun didn't bother to explain further. His sister-in-law's innate talent was indeed heaven-defying. It's very normal for others not to believe based on empty words, but seeing was believing, so the truth would prove everything. After Huang Yueli drew out the first brick, her feet immediately started to sh*t as she revolved several meters around the walls of the cave dwelling and suddenly stretched out her finger. Before anyone could react in time, she had already drawn out the second brick. You can also listen on. Following that, she continued to move as she walked around the wall, and she continuously started to strike, sometimes pulling out a brick and sometimes using profound energy to draw out a marking. While she was doing these, her feet kept on shifting without pausing, and she had completed everything at one go. Right until she went one entire round did she finally stop. Everyone was in a daze while looking at her movements, not knowing what she was up to. Actually, Lang Yifeng and the rest had a faint premonition, but in the deepest depths of their hearts, they totally didn't dare to believe that there was such a thing, so they had been telling themselves, this was impossible. Huang Yueli clapped her hands and said, "All right, I'm finally done." Her words had just landed when a layer of dim light appeared on top of the cave dwelling, which was different from the earlier eye-piercing bright ray. This layer of light was extremely soft but radiated with an extremely strong penetrating power as it lit up a large area in the surroundings. The image of the cave dwelling in the light became much clearer. At the same time, the cave dwelling's entrance had opened up completely as it revealed a neat and tidy pathway, extending all the way inside. This scenario looked totally different from earlier when Murong and I decoded the array. With such comparison, anyone could tell that this was the correct sign of the array being decoded. Luo Jiyun rubbed his eyes as he cried out in astonishment, "So?" There was a layer of mist around the cave dwelling. No wonder it looked dusty earlier. I thought it was because the cave dwelling had been here for too long, hence it was layered with dust and cobwebs. Huang Yueli laughed as she said, "These kinds of buildings are specially constructed with a special kind of material and with the support of arrays. As long as the effect of the array does not disappear, the exterior would not change due to the passing of time. Look, doesn't this cave dwelling look somewhat different from earlier?" Luo Jiyun was enlightened as he nodded his head furiously. After the mist dissipated, the exterior walls of the cave dwelling seemed to have been refurbished as though it had been painted with a new coat of paint, as every piece of brick reflected the sun, looking extremely dazzling. The entire cave dwelling looked even more luxurious, and it was easy to tell that several thousands of years ago, just how magnificent this cave dwelling was and how powerful and highly positioned of a top expert was the owner of the cave dwelling. Luo Jiyun rubbed his palms as he cried out excitedly, "That's great, let's hurry in quickly. This sage Wu Ding doesn't seem like a simple person, so there's definitely great stuff inside." He turned his head back and was about to call out for the Celestial Light Sect's disciples whom he was on better terms with to go in together, but in the end he saw everyone's dazed expressions on their faces. What's the situation? He went into a blank and immediately realized what happened as he couldn't stop laughing. Why are you all in a daze for? Can't you tell that the array outside the cave dwelling had already been decoded? Why are you still wasting time here for? But, this. I feel that I must be dreaming. This array is really decoded. This is just, Junior Sister by really is an array master. How could that be possible? How could there be such a ridiculous genius under the heavens? Forget it that her cultivation innate talent is that abnormal, she's also an armament refining genius, okay, we can deal with that. But why is it that she can also decode a historical array? Even such a talent like Junior Sister Murong had failed earlier. This person had spoken everyone's thoughts, and instantly, it caused a lot of people to echo together with him. You can also listen on. Everyone's astonished gazes shot towards Huang Yueli, feeling that they must be dreaming as this was totally unrealistic. This kind of matter was simply unheard of. Did this kind of genius really exist? Or could it be that they were only dreaming? Huang Yueli's lips curled upwards as she said, "Just a small trick. Although this is a historical array, but it is just a very commonly seen invisible array. Only thing was the one who set the array had great ideas and added in many variations in the small details, hence it was slightly more confusing. In actual fact, it's not difficult to decode an array." Huang Yueli had casually explained with a few words, but did not mention that no matter how simple this array was, it was still an 8th-tier array. However, she didn't bother if anyone believed her or not as she immediately urged, "All right, stop wasting time, let's all enter right now." Celestial Light Sect's disciples had all woken up from the initial dream as they started jumping up jubilantly, rushing towards the cave dwelling's entrance. Murong was completely devastated when she saw this as her eyes rolled back and fainted right there. As the saying went, comparing people made one dead while comparing goods would result in it being dumped. Originally, although she had failed in decoding the array, she could still blame it on the fact that it was due to the array being too advanced. But now that Huang Yueli had really decoded the array successfully, that was a real slap on her face. And it even sounded real loud. Murong was nicknamed as South Sky region's #1 array skill talent. Hadn't she boasted that she would be able to decode the array? In the end, she had duped all her team members. On the contrary, another person had easily decoded the array, and this person wasn't even an array master, but an armament master. Damn, what's the situation right now? Bairuoli said that this is a simple array, so why can't you decode it? Feng Xiaoning howled, utterly discomfited, but looking back, he realized that Murong had already fainted. He furiously kicked Murong flying as she crashed into a tree, and her head happened to knock against a tree branch as blood started to flow. Feng Xiaoning was still not appeased as he said to Lang Yifeng, "What should we do now? It's all my fault for believing that trash Murong's words. Now Celestial Light Sect's own people have decoded the array, so we gain nothing to split now." Lang Yifeng clenched his teeth tightly. Isn't it too early to say that they have decoded the array? Earlier we also thought that we had succeeded, but in the end, we were expelled out. Perhaps their success is merely a false image. These words were obviously a blatant lie to their own selves, but what Green Cloud Sect's people needed was exactly this kind of mental comfort. Someone else immediately echoed, "Right, it's definitely this way. That Bairuoli isn't even an array master, so how could she possibly just decode the array like that?" "That's right, have you seen her running around in that manner earlier? This isn't decoding the array, it's more like dancing, isn't it? Casually jumping around a few times and drawing some imprints and she could decode the array. Could it be any simpler? Is she bullying us that we haven't met an array master before?" Normal array masters would take out their array board when decoding arrays, carefully deducing, considering all the changes in the array before they made a move. Her moves earlier means that she had decoded the array. That would be like seeing a living ghost. I think the Celestial Light Sect is going to be in big trouble this time round, and their outcome will definitely be much worse off than us. You can also listen on. They intentionally said it loudly for Celestial Light Sect's people to hear. As expected, some disciples started to waver as they stopped in their tracks, not daring to move forward. Feng Xiaoning saw this, and suddenly a scheme came to his mind as he leaned in close to Lang Yifeng, speaking softly, "Eldest senior brother, let's be patient and wait a while. After those from Celestial Light Sect have all entered, they would not leave anyone to guard the entrance. Even if there was someone, as long as it wasn't Li Moying himself, they won't be able to stop you. By then we can sneak in behind them. Although we're not able to split most of the loot, but at least it's much better than getting nothing at all." Lang Yifeng hesitated. Isn't this too contemptible? As a direct descendant of the Lang family, he bore the pride of a large families, and this was equivalent to being a thief, so he really couldn't lower himself to do it. Feng Xiaoning replied, "At this kind of timing, what's there to talk about being contemptible or not? Entering the Mystic Region's priority is to gain benefits. Moreover speaking, most of the top experts from our sect are heavily injured, and if we don't take the opportunity to gain some advantages, what shall we do later on?" Lang Yifeng slowly nodded his head. Although both of them were whispering, but as Huang Yueli and Li Moying's soul trace was exceptionally strong, they still heard what they said. Li Moying couldn't help but sneered coldly, totally ignoring them as he walked into the cave dwelling directly. Huang Yueli pursed her lips as she saw that most of Celestial Light's sex people had already entered, and she stood by the entrance of the cave dwelling and drew out an array pattern in mid-air with her right hand. Following her actions, the cave dwelling's entrance started to close up slowly. Feng Xiaoning and Leng Yifeng were originally planning happily, waiting to sneak into the cave dwelling to pick on the leftovers. Whoever knew that before they had the time to be delighted, the cave dwelling's door started to close up. Oh no! How did this happen? Bai Ruoli is going to close up the entrance. Heavens, how is this possible? Wasn't it said that she had not decoded the array successfully? Why is it that she can open or close this array to her liking? What kind of level of mastery in array skills does she have? It's too scary. We're finished, the door is about to close, so that means we totally cannot enter. Leng Yifeng and Feng Xiaoning exchanged glances as he howled, everyone quickly squeeze in right now, we're not going to make it if it's too late. Saying that, the both of them rushed over. Leng Yifeng was indeed the #1 man among the younger generation of Green Cloud's sect. His speed was extremely swift, like a bolt of lightning, as he rushed into the cave dwelling in an instant. Although Huang Yueli had displayed her array skills, but the opening and closing process of the array was rather slow, and this door had not completely closed up when Leng Yifeng directly charged in. Feng Xiaoning's speed wasn't any slower, as well as he followed closely behind, also charging in. After they entered the cave dwelling successfully, the first thing they did was not to race against time to search for treasures, but they both struck out a move towards Huang Yueli at the same time. They were very clear-minded that as long as they were able to control Huang Yueli, this array would not be able to shut fully. So now that the entrance was half closed and the entrance was rather narrow, but they were still able to squeeze in. Huang Yueli was fully concentrated on the array. Controlling a complicated 8th-tier array to the current 5th stage realm first level was absolutely not an easy thing, so she required an extreme amount of concentration, so that she did not make any mistake. You can also listen on. Because of that, Leng Yifeng and Feng Xiaoning's attacks were something that she couldn't go up against. Or even, she totally could not respond to it. In a split second, surging profound energy had reached her chest and was about to deal her with a heavy strike. However, Leng Yifeng still bore tender and protective feelings for her, hence he wasn't too vicious in his attack, but Huang Yueli was in the middle of performing, and if she was interrupted, it would definitely result in an extremely serious backlash, and her meridians would definitely be damaged. On seeing that she was about to be hit, Huang Yueli's face did not show any signs of shock. Instead, she totally didn't attempt to evade it as she stood calmly at her spot, drawing out lines and lines of array patterns without any mistakes, her hands not even shaking at all. Bai Ruoli's reaction is really slow. Still controlling the array at this point of time, she's really looking for her own death. Feng Xiaoning laughed coldly to himself. But before he could finish laughing, a stroke of purple lightning flashed past the air. This bolt of lightning descended from the sky and was rough and bright, as though it was going to split the entire cave dwelling into two. Following the lightning was a thunderous sound, as the ground started to shake. The two of them had an abrupt change of expression as they anxiously retreated to evade, but the speed of the lightning was simply too fast, and before they had time to react, it was already too late. Feng Xiaoning gave a blood-curdling shriek and was struck directly by the lightning on his chest. He turned into a charred black color as his body was still smoking, and he was expelled out of the cave dwelling. Leng Yifeng's reaction was much faster, but he was still struck by the lightning on his shoulder. His arm immediately lost all senses as he was sent flying out as well, while spitting out blood in mid-air, as he fell onto the ground. Only thing was he had not fainted, so he could still see who was the person who had attacked him. Leng Yifeng's eyes peeled wide to stare at the man who appeared suddenly beside Huang Yueli, Li Moying. Hadn't he already entered the cave dwelling? Why did he return to protect Huang Yueli? Moreover, his attack speed was so fast and sudden, but Li Moying could still react in such a short amount of time, with tremendous force to cause such serious injury to the both of them with just one move. What kind of ability was that? Under Leng Fengyi's terrified gaze, Li Moying stood on the right side behind Huang Yueli, displaying a guard's posture, protecting her. Li Moying shot a glance towards Leng Fengyi as he gave a chilly laugh. Dare to make a move to attack my woman, did you really think I was dead? Trying to make use of the confusion to enter the cave dwelling to split a cup of soup. You're daydreaming. Saying that, his sleeve flicked and a burst of severe profound energy was unleashed. Leng Yifeng lost the chance to react as he was swept away just like leaves being blown away by the autumn wind, flying out of the boundary of the cave dwelling. At the same time, Huang Yueli had finally completed all the array patterns as the cave dwelling's entrance started to shut steadily under her control. From the start to the end, the movements on her hands had not stopped, and there hadn't been a moment of slowing down, as she was neither fast nor slow in her steady and accurate actions. As though the two people who popped out and dealt her with a murderous hand had totally not appeared. She was absolutely certain that her fiancé was right by her side and would be able to ensure her safety at any one time, so she was totally unguarded, all because there was totally no need for that. You can also listen on. They had ample rapport, same as in their past lives. After Huang Yueli shut the entrance, Li Moying then stretched out his hand to hold hers, as their fingers locked tightly. Let's go, those irritating houseflies are already gone, so let's hurry in now. Huang Yueli gave a smile as she nodded, walking alongside with him into the cave dwelling. The rapport between the both of them didn't need them to say a single word, and they could mutually understand each other. When she required protection, this man was always this reliable, forever enabling her to feel at ease. The entrance was tightly shut, and towards those outside, this was a scene which made them lose all hope. Leng Yifeng was kicked away like a dead dog by Li Moying, and after being thrown out of the door, he clutched his chest as he struggled to prop up himself. But all he saw was that pair of lovers who walked side by side, disappearing behind the door. Leng Yifeng was so infuriated that he spat out a mouthful of blood. This simply was bullying intolerably. Li Moying actually used such a way to humiliate him. Whereas he had been humiliated several times but did not have any chance to go against him. Ever since meeting Li Moying, he had been subjected to unimaginable torture. He could not match up to Li Moying no matter in what aspect. Each and every single time he tried to challenge him, it would always end up in a miserable ending. Furthermore, the ending was more miserable than the previous. On the other hand, Li Moying was forever calm as he stood at the top. Even till now, Leng Yifeng couldn't tell what was the upper limit of Li Moying's potential. He seemed to be a man with no limits. At any one time, he was able to display abilities which had surpassed one's imagination. Not only that, he was the perfect candidate who gathered both ableness and beauty in one. For example, Huang Yueli, a young lady with shocking innate talent in cultivation, armament refining as well as array skills, she was probably the one and only super existence in the entire Sky Emperor City. All the heirs to the top powerhouses in Sky Emperor City were fighting over to marry her. But this young lady was only faithful towards Li Moying as her gaze was forever on Li Moying. Leng Yifeng felt that he was about to go crazy. Luckily this time he had already thought of an idea for Li Moying to never leave the cloudy Qilan mystic region forever. Thinking of this, Leng Yifeng then forcibly controlled himself. Yes, Li Moying was going to be a dead man soon, so he need not be frustrated, he only needed to endure it this one time. Leng Yifeng clenched his fist tightly as he vowed to heavens, Li Moying, the day you leave the cave dwelling would be the day of your death and shattered reputation. Inside the cave dwelling, Li Moying and Huang Yueli walked to the main hall's courtyard. Entering to take a look, Huang Yueli revealed a slight astonished expression. Because celestial light sect's disciples who had entered this place had all gathered in the courtyard and none of them had grabbed the chance to go search for treasures. This made Huang Yueli rather surprised as the rare treasure towards the ordinary disciples who entered the mystic region for their very first time had a huge attracting power, something which she was very clear of. She had thought that these people would separate on their own ways the minute they entered the door. When everyone saw them walking there, they started to crowd around them in both excitement and agitation. "Miss Bai, you're finally here, we've all been waiting for you." "Yes, you're too incredible, you even know array skills. Your array skills mastery is even higher than that of Murong and I. Just what kind of innate talent is that? Really too heaven-defying, simply unimaginable. You can also listen on. If it hadn't been for you, we'd be finished this time round. Not only are we not able to enter the cave dwelling, we would also have been schemed by those shameless fellows from Green Cloud sect. Junior Sister Bai, I've already decided that from today onwards, you'd replace young sect master and become my most adored idol." Celestial light sect's disciples were all crowding around Huang Yueli, expressing their heartfelt adoration and praises. Because it wasn't the first time that Huang Yueli had saved Celestial Light sect during a crucial moment. Last time, after they had ascertained the quota to the mystic region, it was the same scenario on the arena stage. Everyone thought that Celestial Light sect had failed completely and no matter what they weren't able to turn tables around. When Huang Yueli went on stage for the challenge, no one thought that she would emerge as the ultimate winner, so no one held any high hopes for her. However, the final result was that she had used her own ability to create one miracle after another, pulling strongly against a crazy tide to win the final victory for Celestial Light sect. This matter happened yet again and this accumulated the prestige and status of Huang Yueli in Celestial Light sect's disciples' minds to a shockingly high degree. Li Moying saw the masked disciple's attitude and his lips curled up slightly, feeling extremely delighted in his heart. Although Huang Yueli was his fiancée, but this kind of status would only made Celestial Light sect's disciples treat her with courtesy but not worship or respect her. In Soaring Heaven's continent, only those who wielded truly powerful abilities were able to win the respect from others which came deep down in their hearts. So Huang Yueli obtaining the current status was all based on her own ability, conquering everyone. This made Li Moying felt extremely proud. His Lear was forever that powerful, that outstanding, and no matter where she went, she was the object of everyone's admiration, but unfortunately, she was his, totally devoted to loving him only. As a man, Li Moying felt that his vanity was satisfied to the max. But Li Moying quickly frowned. Those disciples who were crowded around Huang Yueli were extremely agitated and they got closer and closer, squeezing her into the crowd and someone even touched her hand. Li Moying's face immediately turned ugly as he stretched out his long arm and curled it around Huang Yueli's waist, bringing her into his embrace and successfully blocking out the passionate people who were around her. "Alright, Leah already understands your intentions. Right now we're still in the cave dwelling and there's a limit to the activation of the array, so everyone quickly grab hold of time to seek for treasures. If you continue dilly-dallying and miss the timing, then don't blame us for not reminding you. I repeat once again, you're not allowed to break out into a fight over the distribution of the treasures since we're all from the same sect. We must talk things over to settle this, and if there are any private fights between you guys and it falls onto my ears, I will absolutely not let it go. If you understand, then you are dismissed." Li Moying's expression was cold as he made it clear to everyone, and with a wave of his hand, he wanted to dismiss these unimportant people. It really was enough, Lear was his. He allowed others to express their adoration and respect towards his fiancée, but these people kept on revolving around her, so he simply couldn't take it. He and his fiancée wanted their own romantic couple's world, alright. This bunch of unreliable fellow really don't know how to watch the signs. Li Moying's black face was indeed intimidating. Celestial light sect's disciples totally didn't dare to object after hearing him say that. You can also listen on. On seeing everyone being dismissed, Huang Yueli went into a blank as she turned towards Li Moying. Moying, you just let them go off like that. Li Moying's mood was originally not very good, and upon hearing Huang Yueli said that, he got even unhappier. Otherwise, what should I do? Don't tell me you want to hang around with so many attendants around. Huang Yueli finally heard that his tone was filled with unpleasantness as she raised her head to take a look at him and laughed out. Of course I don't mean that. Alright, they're all from your same sect, so why do you have to be jealous? They had merely surrounded her for a slightly longer time. Seriously, he had to even be jealous over this. Saying that, Huang Yueli raised her voice. Senior brothers and senior sisters, everyone please wait a while. The crowd stopped in their footsteps in surprise as they turned around to look at her. Junior sister Bai, what other instructions do you have for us? Huang Yueli smiled and said, earlier when I entered the door, I saw the decoration and structure of this cave dwelling. The first room in the east chamber should be a pill refining room. Second room is a storage room, and there should be quite a number of medicinal pills. Based on Sage Wu Ding's cultivation, the pills should at least be 7th level and above. The first room in the west chamber should be for armament refining, and there should be a storage room on the side as well. Other than that, in the south courtyard, there should be 3 other depots. So you guys can spend some time exploring these places. She thought for a moment and said, right, in order to prevent fighting, everyone ought to distribute the duties and split up into several groups. Each group will search a room and all the treasures will belong to that group. First distribute it and there's no room for regrets later on. She had said that to prevent Celestial Light sect's disciples from arguing and fighting over the treasures, causing internal strife. Although Li Moying had already passed down his instructions, he was after all a man and his thoughts weren't meticulous enough. Moreover, he was too lazy to arrange so carefully. After all, based on his ability and prestige, with a few words of warning and no one would dare to create any trouble. Huang Yueli knew that just saying these weren't enough. Even if they couldn't fight on the surface, it was still very easy to cause conflict. Hence she took the extra step to do the arrangement for the disciples. Hearing her words, originally those disciples who were like headless flies all found their direction as they started to discuss seriously. Seeing this, Huang Yueli's face popped out a smile as she automatically held Li Moying's hand, leaving the front courtyard together. Li Moying was tugged by her moving forward, but he was still scowling. You're rather concerned about those insignificant people, even giving them the idea on how to distribute the treasures. Huang Yueli knew he was jealous, but she blinked as she intentionally put on an innocent look. I'm just doing that out of consideration for you, the young sect master, that's why I helped them with the distribution method. Don't tell me that you're afraid that the treasures would be snatched away by them and you won't be getting anything. Li Moying gave a cold harumph as he stretched out his arm and brought her into his arms, lowering his head as he whispered into her ear. What does it matter if the treasures are all snatched away? What I hate is your attention being snatched away by them. Huang Yueli laughed out as she raised up her arms and hooked them around his neck, then tipping her toes, she leaned in close to the man and her pink lips was just less than an inch away from him as she whispered, how could that be? In my heart, of course my future husband is the most important. If they weren't disciples from your sect, I can't even be bothered. You can also listen on. The young lady in her arms put on an evident smile which was out to please him as her lips curled up slightly and her fair little face seemed especially alluring and tempting. Li Moying's gaze darkened as he ferociously tightened his arm, bringing her petite stature in a circle as she fell into his arms, then lowering his head, he plundered the tender pink in front of his eyes. Their breaths were linked and were harmoniously blended together. As they knew that the occasion wasn't right, so Li Moying didn't kiss her too deeply, only exchanging a gentle and lingering light kiss. Not long after, he released the young lady in his arms, his expression apparently relaxed by quite a bit. Huang Yueli's face flushed with a shade of red as she subconsciously gazed to her left and right, putting on a guilty look. What place was this, and this man just kissed her upon disagreement? If the others were to see them, how embarrassing would that be? Luckily, everyone was too impatient to go search for the treasures, so no one would be so free to specially notice the duo who were hiding in the corner. There wasn't even a passerby in sight around the surroundings. Li Moying saw her bashful look as his mood really lifted up as he said, "All right, where shall we do now? Isn't Grandmaster Huang going to bring me to seek treasure?" Huang Yueli intentionally replied, "I've already distributed all the treasures out, so there's none for you left." Li Moying's brows rose as he smiled, "Still trying to bluff me? It's not my first time on an experience learning trip with you. Since when would a little money grubber like you be so kind-hearted? The best things are definitely left for yourself, isn't that so?" Huang Yueli gave a humph, "Those are meant for me, not for you." Li Moying totally didn't mind what she said as he continued smiling, "Isn't yours mine as well? In our home, the wife calls the shots, so the treasures will naturally be managed by you. As long as you occasionally give me some pocket money, after all surely you won't want to see your husband die of hunger, right?" Huang Yueli rolled her eyes at him coquettishly, "You make it sound as though I've always been mistreating you. As though I've never shared anything with you." Even during her past life, the best piece of profound armament which she refined was not her bell under the moon but was the clear sky dark cloud sword which she had specially refined for Mu Qingying then. As she had almost exhausted all of her blood essence and profound energy after refining that sword, she had to recuperate for a year plus before she recuperated to her peak. Speaking of that, she had really not accepted too much money from this man and instead, lost money by wasting a lot of 9th grade materials on it. Recalling this, she must have really liked him a lot then. Otherwise she totally could not imagine that she would do such a losing business. Li Moying knew this very clearly, so he eagerly leaned close to her. "Yes, yes, yes, my wife treats me the best." "Don't you talk rubbish, who is your wife? We're not even married yet," Huang Yueli complained. Li Moying laughed, "Sooner or later you'd be mine." This overbearing declaration had exchanged for 2 white eyeballs without any accident. Li Moying's guess wasn't wrong. Huang Yueli had indeed carefully observed the cave dwelling's layout and knew the location of where the rare treasure could possibly be located. This was not entirely based on profound energy or soul trace, but based on her expertise as a 9th-rank armament master. In order to guarantee the cave dwelling's safety and nature of concealment, the distribution of the layout and structure of the mechanisms in the cave were extremely meticulous, so only she alone was able to find out the exact situation in the first moment. Li Moying's cultivation was much higher than hers, but in this aspect, he totally could not be comparable to her at all. You can also listen on. Huang Yueli was in the front leading the way while Li Moying followed behind her closely. The both of them walked past the front courtyard and towards the back of the corridor, finally stopping in the front of an extremely ordinary room door. After Huang Yueli stopped, her face revealed a grave expression. "If I'm not wrong, the bright ray which was caused by that rare treasure should be in this room." Li Moying couldn't help but frowned, "But even if it's me, just standing here now, I also can't sense the situation inside the room." Senses towards treasures were mainly related to soul trace, and Li Moying's soul trace was extremely powerful. By right they were just separated by a thin wooden door, so it shouldn't be possible that he couldn't sense the rare treasure inside. Huang Yueli's expression turned even graver, "But the entire cave dwelling's best spiritual spot is right here. In order to maintain the array outside the cave dwelling from operating normally, an important treasure must be placed inside so that it can maintain the entire array's profound energy balance. If even you can't sense it," her slender brows creased slightly, "that could only mean that this room has been set up with an extremely powerful invisible array. Either This room's rare treasure itself had the attribute of concealing itself. But if it's the latter, then things will be rather difficult to handle. Ordinary treasures naturally couldn't conceal itself. The higher grade the treasure, the more powerful imposing manner it would emit, and even if it was a distance far, far away, one would still be able to sense it. In order to conceal it, it would entirely depend on the various methods which the treasure's master had exerted. If a piece of treasure was actually able to conceal its own presence, that would only meant that this piece of treasure had already developed its own spiritual nature, which meant that the rare treasure in this room was at least a half-god relic. Li Moying stared at her little face as he asked, "Then what should we do?" "No choice. Now that we're unable to use our soul trace to sense the interior, we can only attempt to decode the entrance's mechanisms and array to first open the door and then check out the situation inside. As usual, I'll be responsible for opening the door and you're responsible for protecting me." Huang Yueli raised her head as her gaze met the man's sight. Li Moying nodded in head in seriousness. "Rest assured, I'll protect you well." Hearing this man's words always made her feel assured. Huang Yueli revealed a smile as she hurriedly coughed to hide it. "All right, then I'll start." The minute she finished her words, her expression immediately turned solemn as her gazes were slightly congealed while she concentrated fully. Her right hand rose up and drew out an incantation gesture in midair as her fingers turned and flew, throwing it out towards the middle of that room's door. Immediately following that, strokes after strokes of incantation gestures were like flowing water as it went on continuously. Her footsteps also kept on changing along with the variations, coordinating with the movements on her hand. Her sleeves fluttered as she maintained an elegant and calm pose, as though she was dancing. Li Moying stood behind her on her right as his eyes were fixated on her dancing figure, his gaze profound yet calm. His leer was indeed very beautiful. Just looking at her decoding the mechanisms was indeed an eye candy, making him unable to shift his eyes away. But he also knew clearly that all these were just a presentation only. Huang Yueli wasn't really dancing but executing an extremely dangerous mission. You can also listen on. Although on the surface it looked easy without any effort. But in reality, it just took one wrong step and the mechanisms and arrays would be activated immediately. What happened to Green Cloud's sect earlier would occur to them as well. Furthermore, there were only the two of them and the room in front of them was specially used to store the rare treasure, so the array's might could only be strong. Moreover, extremely strong. Huang Yueli herself was the array decoder and the risk she had to take on was the largest. If anything were to happen, she would be the first to face the music, suffering a serious backlash. So she could not afford to make any mistake. Li Moying knew that his little fiancé excelled in this aspect, but he still wasn't at ease and he had been cautious and anxious all the while. Even if Huang Yueli had usually easily succeeded 10,000 times, but it just needed that one failure for her to be heavily injured, and that was something which he couldn't afford to happen. Luckily, Huang Yueli's decoding process this time round was extremely smooth and no accidents of any sort had happened. She had struck out several incantation gestures consecutively and plotted out the array patterns. After 1 hour later, the profound energy fluctuations on her had evidently become weaker. Apparently with her 5th stage realm cultivation, she wasn't able to take on the exhaustion liability of decoding this kind of advanced array. But at the same time, the array's intensity was slowly becoming weaker as it became less threatening gradually. Finally, after a flash of ray shot past, the room door suddenly opened up without any breeze. Huang Yueli heaved a sigh of relief. That's great, it's finally open. This array is simply too complicated, I'm so tired. Ah! Her eyes abruptly turned wide while she was talking halfway. A blue-purplish lightning suddenly zipped out from the room and with lightning-fast speed, it seemed like a bolt of flash as it suddenly charged towards her. But Li Moying's reaction was even faster. Just at the instance when the blue light appeared, He had already grabbed the amethyst light sword with his backhand while the other hooked around Huang Yueli's waist, pulling her back and throwing her to one side. As the situation was pretty urgent, Li Moying's actions seemed rather rough. Huang Yueli was thrown aside by him as she almost fell down. She stumbled for several steps before she forcibly steadied her body. She hurriedly turned back to take a look, and upon one gaze, she gave off a shocked expression. That bolt of purple light that zipped out ferociously from the room had turned into a huge virtual image in the middle of the courtyard, reflecting a magical beast state. This magical beast was several feet tall, and its eyes gave off a lightning kind of eye-piercing lightning ray as the scales on its entire body gave off a dazzling yet cold phosphorescent glow, making it look exceptionally dangerous. This is the Qilin spiritual beast. Huang Yueli was overwhelmed with amazement as her face changed colors. The first time she recalled was when they first activated the cloudy Qilin mystic region. They had seen the totem of a Qilin spiritual beast on the empty grounds at the mystic region's entrance. Whereas this was exactly the same as the carving which they had seen earlier. Huang Yueli's face turned pale as the imposing manner which was emitted from this Qilin had already reached the grade of a matured spiritual beast. Just as she was in a daze, Li Moying had already started to engage in a battle with this Qilin. His peerlessly handsome face was even colder than usual as his gaze was deep-set and grave. His profound energy had entirely been adjusted as it kept on taking in the thunder attribute profound energy from several miles within the radius, gathering towards his body. You can also listen on. Momentarily, the entire courtyard was filled with invasive thunder attributed profound chi. A spiritual beast Qilin, adding on to the suppression of Li Moying's profound energy gathered in this small space, and the feeling of suppression was something which was indescribable with mere words. Even Huang Yueli was starting to not be able to take it as her complexion slowly turned pale as her chest started to throb with a dull pain. But she wasn't willing to retreat, nor could she leave this place because Li Moying was still engaged in the battle with the virtual image of the Qilin, so she absolutely would not retreat alone. But in order not to drag Li Moying down, she hid herself behind a pillar and worked up her cultivation method, trying to resist against that one man and one beast suppression while concentrating fully on the battle, hoping to get a chance to aid Li Moying. Just as this moment, Qilin raised up its huge paw and an extremely severe lightning struck towards Li Moying. That lightning was extremely thin and it looked like a glowing embroidery needle, but it was exceptionally bright, so bright that just another look more at it would result in instant blindness. Huang Yueli anxiously widened her eyes because based on her experience, she naturally could tell that this bolt of lightning had not become so thin because it was weak. But rather it was because all the profound energy was compressed within such a small space, hence the minute one was struck, the consequences would be dire. Even for a genius like Li Moying would probably be heavily injured. The courtyard space was really too small and Li Moying wasn't able to evade in time, so he could only raise his sword to meet it, but as the distance between both parties' profound energy wasn't very huge, he was still sent flying as his body crashed against the wall. That bolt of lightning struck his chest directly and entered his body. Huang Yueli was so shocked that she immediately jumped up. Such a powerful thunder attributed profound energy directly entering his body, how would that do? If something bad was to happen, his internal organs and meridians would be scorched until it broke up into inches. She clenched her teeth as she immediately wanted to rush over to help. But just at this moment, the surroundings of Li Moying's body appeared a layer of faint purplish light, enveloping him right in the middle. Li Moying, who should have been coughing up blood from the serious injury, did not show any pain on his face. On the contrary, he gave an astonished and shocked expression. He stretched out his hand to cover the chest area where he was struck and couldn't help but went into a blank. Just as this moment, the Qilin immediately pursued over as it continued to make its moves. Huang Yueli had already dashed out by half a footstep when she suddenly stopped. Looking at Li Moying's lively looks, it seemed that he was all right. What was going on? Just within this short moment, Li Moying and the spiritual beast Qilin had changed several rounds. Li Moying's senses were originally grave, but as time went by, he was dealing with it with much ease. Huang Yueli was also very anxious right from the start, and she slowly started to calm down. At the same time, she was able to tell that something was not right. Ancient spiritual beasts each led in their own regions, and all the spiritual beasts had attributes. For example, Huang Yueli's little phoenix was of the fire attribute, so apparently this Qilin's virtual image was of thunder attribute. Extremely coincidentally, Li Moying was also of the thunder attribute. Among the same kind of attributed practitioners, as they could mutually take in part of the other party's profound energy, so the damage they could cause was normally much lower as compared to normal circumstances. Moreover, under the circumstances where their cultivations were close, the one who gained victory would normally not be the one who had a stronger cultivation but the one who was more outstanding in terms of attribute innate talent. You can also listen on. Huang Yuelh should have known this point much earlier, but right from the start she had assumed that the Qilin spiritual beast's thunder attribute innate talent would definitely be higher than Li Moying's because it was after all an ancient spiritual beast. But the scenarios which happened later on made her rather stunned. Because the person who slowly gained an upper hand was actually Li Moying. This meant to say that Li Moying's thunder attribute innate talent was above the ancient spiritual beasts. What kind of innate talent was that? What kind of potential was that? Even if Huang Yueli self-admitted that her innate talent had surpassed most people and that she had been through huge waves, but just the thought alone left her trembling in fear. Wasn't Li Moying a little too perverse? At this moment, Li Moying and the Qilin spiritual beast were entering the end of the battle. Li Moying had based his innate talent to deflect most of the Qilin's damage, and even in this abundant thunder-attributed profound Qi environment, he kept on absorbing the energy from the surroundings to build up his own power. Under this kind of huge pressure battle to improve himself, his speed became faster and faster as his moves were getting more and more precise and overbearing. Huang Yueli's eyes grew wider and wider because Li Moying seemed as though he was entering the state of advancement again. It had only been half a year since he advanced into 7th stage, and right now he was going to break through to 7th stage realm's 6th level. According to this speed, he would be able to break through to the 9th stage realm in under 2 years. Even when he was in his previous life, the speed of advancement was much slower, and was totally incomparable. Li Moying's imposing manner was getting stronger and stronger, whereas the Qilin spiritual beast's power was gradually becoming weaker and weaker under his attacks. Roughly after 2 hours, Huang Yueli could see from her naked eyes that the virtual image of the Qilin was becoming more and more illusory and blurry. This was the display that its energy was becoming weaker and weaker, and that meant that its battle power had already dropped drastically. Huang Yueli heaved a long sigh as she knew that they should be able to get past this stage. Indeed, Li Moying's last consecutive moves lit up the sky in dazzling rays, making one become blurry-eyed, and lastly a sword glint stabbed viciously into the Qilin's heart. With a ping sound, the purplish lighting which enveloped the Qilin's virtual image was completely shattered by him. The virtual image turned into specks of thunder-attributed energy as it slowly dissipated into the sky. Li Moying's face revealed a smile as he kept his sword. Huang Yueli immediately pounced towards him as she anxiously checked on him from head to toe. "Moying, are you all right? Earlier I was really scared to death." "That was an ancient spiritual beast." Li Moying shook his head and laughed. "No need to worry. That was just a virtual image of the spiritual beast thoughts being trapped here. It had been so many years and it could at most preserve 10% of its actual ability. Plus the compatibility of the attribute, dealing with it wasn't especially difficult." Huang Yueli stared at him. "Do you think I'm a fool? Using these words to coax and lying to me? You really think that I couldn't tell that you almost got into trouble initially? Look at all these wounds on you." She used her hand to rub Li Moying's largest wound on his chest, making that man suck in a deep breath of cold air immediately. Even though he was able to neutralize most of the thunder attributed profound energy which had caused damage, but those electric currents still caused damage to his physical body, and that was something unavoidable. Now, there were numerous external injuries on his body, and some of these malicious wounds were still bleeding. But it merely looked serious on the surface only. You can also listen on. To a practitioner, this standard of external injury was easily healed. Seeing his little fiancée getting so worried and anxious, Li Moying was touched, but he also found it a little comical. All right, stop being so tense. The injuries I've suffered in the past were much heavier than this, and you were never that tensed. Now what happened? Huang Yueli retorted angrily, how could that be the same? The smile in Li Moying's eyes grew deeper as he leaned in closer to her, speaking out softly, what's not the same? Huang Yueli felt her face burning up due to his closing in, and at the same time felt embarrassed from his question. Not the same, of course not the same. She hated this man in the initial stages in her past life, feeling that his character was too overbearing and he didn't know how to respect her. Furthermore, he was extremely full of himself, thinking that since he was the #1 top expert in soaring heaven's continent, then she must marry him. So during that time when he was injured because of her, she would silently say that he deserved it. But not too long after, her feelings underwent a change. Li Moying saw her silence and roughly guessed the thinking in her mind as his lips gave off a gentle smile, slowly leaning in closer to her. Just as their lips were about to meet, Huang Yueli suddenly regained her senses as she subconsciously pushed him at his chest area. SSSSSSSS. Li Moying immediately gave a sharp cry as his expression became twisted from the pain. Lear, are you trying to murder your own husband? Huang Yueli realized that she had done something wrong as she bit her lips in embarrassment. Earlier she got a little too worked up and had forgotten the fact that Li Moying was still injured. Especially the wounds on his chest area were not just a little, so this push probably made that man want to throw up blood, right? She hurriedly retrieved medication pills from the Sky Phoenix ring and stuffed it into his mouth while explaining, this blood-inducing pill is most effective for treating excessive bleeding symptoms. And this 9 Karlgren intermittent ointment is for applying on your external wounds. Quickly apply some, it's really very effective. If it's purely an external wound, you'd recover completely within 3 days, not leaving any scars behind. Looking at his own fiancée's anxious expression, Li Moying felt a warmth rising in his heart. Huang Yueli did a basic first aid treatment on Li Moying's wounds, and later on, as she still wasn't rest assured, she kept asking him on his condition. Li Moying hurriedly replied, rest assured, I'm really fine and I won't take my own body as a joke. First stop busying yourself. Now that the secret room's door is finally opened, shouldn't we be taking a look inside to see what's hidden in it? Ah, right, treasure. Huang Yueli jumped up only to recall that she had forgotten the most important thing. She hurriedly turned around and ran towards the secret room. Li Moying looked at her departing figure comically as he shook his head. How would his little money grubber miss any chance usually to make money from the treasures? But now, because of the fact that he was injured, this young lass had completely forgotten about the treasure which was within reach and had been intertwining on that little injury of his. He especially liked this arrogantly pampered hypocrisy. After the Qilin's virtual image had been crushed by Li Moying, the secret room's door had opened up entirely. Although Huang Yueli was anxious to see what was inside, but she was after all an experienced practitioner, so she remembered that she had to act carefully and cautiously. As she walked, she kept on checking the distribution of the surrounding mechanisms, ruling out the various dangers that could possibly exist. You can also listen on. Li Moying was especially reassured while he followed behind her as the two of them walked into the room. This secret room looked extremely ordinary on the exterior, but upon walking inside, they discovered that its space was much bigger than what they had imagined. The place nearer to the door had 2 vertical rows of altars raised high up, and each row laid 6 pieces of profound armaments in order. These profound armaments were all 9th-tier upper-grade armaments, and the 6 pieces were a set. One was for increasing attack power while the other was to increase defense. Huang Yueli walked to the front, and when she saw these, her eyes instantly lit up. To tell the truth, the refinement of 9th-grade profound armaments was a difficult process for each piece, and in the past 100 years or so in Soaring Heaven's continent, only she was able to refine it. Needless to say, 9th-grade profound armament set was to refine all 6 pieces into an entire set. The amount of profound energy exhausted was not a mere simple 6 folds, but at least a total of 20 to 30 folds. This astonishing exhaustion was something that even Huang Yueli could not afford. So she could at most refine a 3-piece set of 9th-tier lower-grade armament, and that was already a top-range quality profound armament within Soaring Heaven's continent. Whereas for now, appearing right here was a 6-piece 9th-tier upper-grade profound armament set. If one could equip oneself with those at the same time, it would probably exhibit the same effect as a half-god relic. The value of it was something which didn't require more talking. That's great, I knew it. For a large clan like the Cloudy Cheelan clan, the things that they left behind in the Mystic region must be good stuff. We haven't made a wasted trip this time round. Her mood was extremely good, and she stretched out her hand to pick up the profound armaments on the altar one piece after another, and after observing it for a moment, she blatantly kept it in her own space, not leaving a single piece for Li Moying. Li Moying totally treated as though nothing had happened as he smiled lightly standing behind her. Seeing her moving excitedly to explore around the place, he kept his security senses tight just in case some accidents happened, and he was still able to react in time to protect his lair. Huang Yueli kept all the profound armaments carefully and turned back to take a look at him, asking curiously, "Why? You let me keep it all away. Aren't you going to ask me what I want to do with it?" Speaking of that, these 9th-tier upper-grade profound armaments were all of the Thunder attribute, the main reason probably being the fact that most of the Cloudy Cheelan clan were of Thunder attribute. So the most suitable person to use them was Li Moying. If Huang Yueli were to use them, she might not be able to exhibit even half of the effects at all. Moreover speaking, when both of them entered the Mystic region, Huang Yueli didn't say anything as she just kept everything away. If it was another person, he would have had a huge fight with her over it long ago. Even a biological father, son or brothers would turn into foes immediately. Li Moying gave a disapproving smile as he replied, "You have your reasons for taking it. Perhaps after it went through your hands, the power of the profound armament would become even stronger and I'd be the one gaining the advantage." Huang Yueli heard that and knew that this man's heart was linked to hers as he could tell her intentions in one look. Although she wasn't able to use the 9th-tier upper-grade profound armament set, but as a 9th-rank armament master, she was extremely interested in the structure and refining method of the profound armament, so she was thinking of doing some research on it before giving it to Li Moying. Besides that, Huang Yueli had collected some ancient methods to attach magic onto the 9th-tier profound armaments, and after she had treated it successfully, she would return it to Li Moying. The effects would definitely be much better than now. She was thinking of that in her heart and did not say it out, but she had not expected that Li Moying had already guessed her motive. You can also listen on. Huang Yueli felt very happy, but she was still expressing her coquetry on the surface. "Who said I was going to give it to you? I'm keeping it for my own collection." Li Moying gave a warm and gentle smile. All right, you can keep it as long as you're happy. Anyway, I am yours as well, all yours." Huang Yueli swept him a glance as she wanted to continue being arrogantly pampered, but her lips uncontrollably rose up to an arc. Just as the both of them were speaking, suddenly a soft whimpering was heard from the inner part of the room, sounding like a little kitten mewing. In that quiet and serene room with such a strange sound being released, it made Li Moying and Huang Yueli stunned for a moment as they immediately shut their mouths up at the same time as they searched everywhere for the origin of the sound. Very quickly, they noticed a small tall counter in the deepest part of the secret room. But due to the dim light inside, they could only faintly see the tall counter being covered by a scarlet-red rug but unable to tell what thing was on the counter. They exchanged a glance and saw the astonished look in each other's eyes. Huang Yueli said, "What's that?" "It feels like some kind of living thing. Let's quickly head over and take a look." As she said that, she turned around and wanted to walk over, but her wrist was held on tightly by Li Moying as he wrestled her back. "Wait, what are you so anxious about? This secret room is filled with mechanisms, so aren't you afraid that there would be danger?" "I'll head over first, you follow me." Li Moying gave her a stare. Huang Yueli replied disapprovingly, "I've already cleared all the mechanisms earlier, and moreover speaking, I can judge by myself. I'm an armament master, and, all right, you go first." Li Moying gave her another stare and Huang Yueli felt rather guilty as she pouted and her voice grew softer and softer. Li Moying let go of her as he headed up first. This room was very deep inside, so sunlight couldn't reach in at all. It was virtually covered in pitch darkness in the deepest end. Li Moying stretched out his arm as he casually waved his arm and a bright light lit up, instantly splitting into 8 sparks, slowly separating out into the 8 different directions as it hovered in mid-air. This move made Huang Yueli's eyes lit up. To be able to grasp such good control of fire-attributed elements meant that this man's fire-attribute innate talent was extremely shocking. Even though he couldn't be compared to her, but he had at least 9th grade and above. Li Moying's innate talent in this life was indeed much more powerful than in his past life. Suddenly she heard that weak whimpering sound again as she turned her head urgently towards the tall counter. This time with the aid of the sparks, they could distinctly see a small bundle under the red rug, as it kept on trembling. Evidently it was a living little thing. Huang Yueli sensed something and observed the surrounding situation. After she made sure that there was no problem, she shot upwards like an arrow and lifted up the rug. Underneath the rug laid a small little magical beast which curled up. It was only a foot long and its entire body was filled with fine scales. But its scales were still rather fine and soft, and those little pieces were exceptionally dazzling. Under the surrounding fire sparks, it radiated with brilliant lights which was extremely beautiful. Huang Yueli took a look and revealed a delighted expression. "Wow, this is a little qilin. It's so pretty. So adorable." She stretched out her hand and wanted to carry the little qilin, but whoever knew that her slender fair finger was just about to touch the dazzling scale when she suddenly felt an enormous amount of energy exploding from that little qilin. She was caught unawares and immediately sent flying back from the shock. You can also listen on. Huang Yueli's body was sent flying back in a split second. Li Moying had always been watching her in full concentration and alertness, and on seeing this, he immediately moved. His figure turned into a dash of brilliant light which was so shockingly fast and managed to catch hold of her before Huang Yueli crashed onto the wall. Huang Yueli crashed heavily onto her own fiancé's chest, and she had yet to settle her shock when she heard the man's dull moan from behind. She hurriedly turned over and asked anxiously, "Oh, Moying, are you all right?" "I'm fine, the one in trouble is you." Li Moying stared fiercely at her, and on seeing her pulling back her shoulder pitifully, he was still not appeased as he couldn't help but pinch her nose, turning it all red. Huang Yueli hurriedly covered her nose. "Boo-hoo, now you're conducting domestic violence. I'm really so pitiful." "You're pitiful. I'm the one who's pitiful. I told you 10 million of times that you must be careful. It's merely just a little qilin, what's there to be excited about?" Li Moying replied her in an upset tone. Huang Yueli couldn't help but rebutted, "What do you mean by just a little qilin? This is an ancient spiritual beast. Don't tell me you don't know what a young sapling of a spiritual beast means in soaring heaven's continent. I've grown until this big and only seen an ancient spiritual beast in drawings." Li Moying gave her a chilly stare. "You don't even draw up a draft when you're bullsh asterisk ting, only seen it on drawings. Then what's that stupid bird called Wang Kai?" Huang Yueli was speechless as she stomped her feet. "You're intentionally picking on me. Anyway, other than Wang Kai, have you ever seen any other living spiritual beasts? Even if it's Wang Kai, it's merely just a spiritual body. Whereas this is a living ancient spiritual beast." She intentionally emphasized once again as she added, "Moreover, it's so cute." Li Moying was flabbergasted, but he also understood that what Huang Yueli said was correct. The sapling of an ancient spiritual beast, if he nurtured it properly, it would become a powerful aid in future. Especially after their rebirths, no matter in terms of their cultivation or the backing behind them, it was totally incomparable to their past lives. They needed to resume back to the peak and to find out the mastermind who harmed Huang Yueli then, so powerful battle power was definitely required. With this little qilin, it indeed was doubling their power. Li Moying hugged Huang Yueli and let her just, "All right, let me do it. You worrisome young lass, move aside." Huang Yueli anxiously followed behind him. "You, be careful. Earlier I went to hug that little qilin and had already observed carefully. There aren't any special mechanisms in the surroundings, so it's the little qilin's spiritual power which expelled me. Although it had been sealed away for so many years, its ability is definitely not ordinary, so you must be very careful." Huang Yueli had not yet completed her sentence when her eyes suddenly widened as it was filled with indescribable shock. She saw Li Moying walk over to the tall counter in big steps. He first observed the surroundings, and after hearing Huang Yueli mention that there weren't any mechanisms, he directly reached his hand out towards that little qilin. His action was very gentle, very slow, and moreover he had worked up his profound energy, preparing for a fierce battle at any point of time. But reality was out of their expectations. When Li Moying's finger touched that little qilin, he didn't feel any resistance, or perhaps it could be said that he didn't feel any profound energy fluctuations at all. You can also listen on. He stretched out both hands as he directly held the little qilin and lifted it up. For the entire duration, the entire process was unexpectedly smooth and he totally didn't show any signs of expulsion. Huang Yueli was totally dazed upon seeing this scenario, and after some time, she walked up and said in a dissatisfied tone, "What's going on? How could it be like this? Why is it that you can hug it while I was being rejected in such a harsh manner?" Li Moying replied, "Well," he was about to say something when he felt the little thing in his hand suddenly nudged. Little qilin's body shook several times in his hand and slowly opened its eyes. That pair of clear and lively crystal-like eyes was bright and sparkly as brilliant lights radiated from it, merging as one with its gorgeous scales on its body. "Wow!" Huang Yueli was just about to exclaim that this little thing was just too adorable, but she had not expected that immediately after the little qilin opened its eyes, it turned its head towards Li Moying and stuck out its little tongue, licking Li Moying's palm several times. This obedient look was just too adorable. Huang Yueli instantly forgot to lecture it as she stretched out her hand wanting to touch it. Whoever knew, this time was exactly the same as previous. Her finger had yet touched the little qilin when she felt a huge wave of energy coming at her. Luckily she was prepared this round and managed to retract her hand in time while retreating several steps, getting rid of that strength. What situation is this? Huang Yueli's eyes widened like full moons. Little qilin raised its head and cried out in her direction. Although she didn't understand the qilin language, but just from the tone alone, Huang Yueli could instinctively tell that this little Qilin was filled with disgust towards her. Li Moying couldn't help but laughed out. Honestly speaking, he had never seen Huang Yueli putting on such a deflated expression in front of a spiritual pet. Because she had always been given the gift of attracting young saplings since her past life. She was especially able to gain various high-leveled magical beasts' younglings' favorable impression, and she would always receive various spiritual pets when she went on experience learning. It was Li Moying whose nature was cold, hence many young magical beasts were afraid of him. Those spiritual pets which were contracted by him were usually coerced by his power and not out of their own willingness, unlike Huang Yueli, who had many spiritual pets coming over to request for her to accept them. This was the first time that this little Qilin actually liked Li Moying so much, and on the contrary, hated Huang Yueli. Huang Yueli's face turned black. You still dare to laugh? What bewitching soup did you give this little thing? Li Moying hurriedly replied, I'm innocent, I didn't do anything at all. There's probably a reason why it doesn't like you, probably because... Ah! He was talking halfway when he felt a sharp pain from his wrist as he couldn't help but cried out in alarm. The two of them lowered their heads and saw little Qilin, after licking Li Moying several times, suddenly revealing its sharp fangs as it bit down hard on his wrist. Little Qilin's fangs were exceptionally sharp, and in an instant, it had caused Li Moying to be injured. A malicious wound appeared on his wrist as blood started to flow outwards. Little Qilin leaned its head over and licked several mouthfuls of blood. At the same time, its body started to change evidently. Seeing its body slowly turning huge, almost inflating to twice its length, the scales also obviously turning harder. It raised its head and gave a loud roar resplendently. You can also listen on. Roar. A bright voice broke the room's silence, and little Qilin's scales gave off a blinding radiance. Li Moying's expression turned grave as he pursed his lips, and his right hand gathered a dim blue-purplish glow, drawing out a blinding mark in midair. The speed of his movements was extremely fast, and within 3 breaths of time, he had already struck out 10 over incantation gestures. Little Qilin followed his actions and moved its little head to the left and right, while giving off an ah cry on and off. Lastly, it spat out a sliver of blood essence from its mouth, merging into one with the array pattern which Li Moying had drawn. A bright light bridge connected between the man and beast. That light bridge only flashed once and disappeared soon after. Following that, little Qilin seemed as though it had instantly exhausted all the energy within as its little brain drooped downwards, leaning against Li Moying's arm, totally not moving, as though it was asleep. Its body size also started to shrink, returning back to the original size when Huang Yueli had just discovered it. Huang Yueli was originally stunned, but very quickly she realized what was happening, so she didn't dare to move or made any sound, worried that she might interrupt this one man and one beast. It was until now that she opened her mouth. You actually contracted this little Qilin. Moreover, it automatically bit your skin to contract with you. Li Moying's lips curled into a smile as he kept caressing little Qilin's scales on its back admiringly. Didn't you say that I'm so fierce and no young magical beast would like me? See, there's still some little thing which knows my value, knowing that following a owner like me will give it a bright future. Huang Yueli seemed as though her pain spot was stepped on by him as she replied in an unresigned manner, What do you mean? Earlier that was a coincidence. It must have been you who used some scheme or trickery to lure this little thing. Otherwise how could it possibly only like you and not like me? Saying that, she reached out her hand for the 3rd time, attempting to carry this little Qilin. Whoever knew that the minute she closed in, little Qilin suddenly awoke and its little head rose up as it looked at her in full alert while giving off an cry, obviously threatening her not to come nearer. Huang Yueli's face turned green. Li Moying couldn't endure it and laughed, I told you. It doesn't like you. Huang Yueli gave him a stare while feeling extremely unhappy. Could it be that she had no more charm left? Even a small animal didn't like her and her fiancé kept on teasing her. Seeing his little fox's upset expression, Li Moying realized that he had gone overboard. As though he was really afraid that she was really angry, he hurriedly leaned over and said, "Lear, really angry? I'm just joking around. This little Qilin doesn't like you probably isn't your problem, but there's a real reason to it." Huang Yueli asked curiously, "What? What's the reason?" Li Moying explained, "Do you still remember that when we first entered the mystic region, what the old fellow Cui Yuan Shan said? He said this mystic region was left behind by an ancient god clan, Cloudy Qilin clan, and that this clan seemed to have some feud with the sacred phoenix race. According to the records in the ancient manuals, various god clans would rear a certain spiritual beast, and this Qilin is obviously reared by the Cloudy Qilin clan. It doesn't like a young lass from sacred phoenix race, which is a very normal thing." Huang Yueli heard his explanation and immediately understood the reason. When Cui Yuan Shan was introducing the situation in Cloudy Qilin mystic region, he had really mentioned this matter. You can also listen on. It wasn't wrong to say that. It was just that they didn't know what feud had between the Cloudy Qilin clan and sacred phoenix race, that even a tiny spiritual beast wasn't willing to see her. Furthermore, the more she thought, the more unreconciled she felt. This pretty little thing was discovered by her first. She merely wanted to caress it only, and it actually didn't allow her to do so. She felt very tired. Her despondent and disappointed expression looked a little pitiful. Li Moying shook his head as he smiled, stretching out his hand to tease the little Qilin around his arm as he opened his mouth. "Little thing, do you see this beautiful sister? She's your mistress, and if she doesn't like you, neither will I. So you have to listen to her obediently, do you understand?" Little Qilin's two round eyes bore a shocked expression as it kept giving out an "ah" cry. Spiritual beasts were excellent with human nature. It was easy to tell by just looking at little Wang Kai arguing with Huang Yueli every day. Although little Qilin was still young, but understanding what Li Moying said was no issue at all. Hearing its new master's request, it was both upset and anxious, as it tried its best to stomp its little feet. Huang Yueli totally couldn't understand what it was trying to say and could only sense its extreme repulsion towards her. As she was feeling stuffed, she felt repulsive about everything that Li Moying did. Li Moying quietly listened for a moment. After he and little Qilin had formed a contract, he was able to use his soul trace to communicate with it. Not knowing what the man and beast communicated, Li Moying went silent for a moment and continued speaking. "No matter what, she's my fiancée and your mistress. If you still want to follow me around with the contract and leave this lousy mystic region, then you must respect her." Little Qilin drooped its head immediately, apparently not expecting its owner to be so overbearing. It was an ancient spiritual beast with esteemed bloodline. But it actually couldn't be compared to a woman who made one disgusted. However, circumstances were stronger than a man. Li Moying was now its real owner, and no matter how it disliked Huang Yueli, there was no way it could go against its owner. Li Moying raised his arm and carried little Qilin over to Huang Yueli. This time when Huang Yueli stretched out her hand to touch it, although little Qilin still drooped its head with an unwilling look, but it had no choice but to control itself to lay flat on Li Moying's palm, allowing Huang Yueli to caress it in any way she liked. Huang Yueli originally was curious about how those beautiful scales felt like, but on seeing little Qilin putting on such an unhappy expression, her mood suddenly came and directly carried that thing over and started all sorts of ravage, rubbing and rolling her between her hands, pinching and kneading it. Li Moying knew that she was using this opportunity to vent her anger as he almost burst out laughing. Huang Yueli was playing around with it when she suddenly cried out, "Right, this little thing still doesn't have a name yet. I'm its mistress, so can I give it a name?" Her eyes suddenly turned huge as she stared at Li Moying. Li Moying originally wouldn't reject her, but since she put on a deliberate act of cuteness, it made his heart go soft as he immediately nodded his head. Of course. What name do you want to give it? About this, her eyeballs rolled around. Little Qilin suddenly had a bad premonition as it hurriedly struggled to climb away from her hand, crying non-stop. However, Huang Yueli had a tight hold over it as she continued, "Amen, look at its pretty scales which are gleaming with gold sparkles, it looks like it's very good at inviting wealth. Let's just gain a complimentary remark, call it Ifa Kai." Footnotes. It means, striking it rich, you can also listen on. When little Qilin heard this name, its eyes opened wide as though it was struck by lightning as it looked at its owner in grief, hoping that he could help it gain back some justice to stop this abnormal bad woman. Whoever knew. PFFFFFT. Li Moying directly spurted as he choked on his saliva. Following that, the words he said directly shattered little Qilin's heart. All right, it's really a good name. I express extreme like for it. Then in future, Fa Kai will be the newest member in our family. He knew that little Qilin's name wasn't going to be any way nice, but since the phoenix was named Wang Kai 1 and the Qilin was named Fa Kai 1, which was rather normal, right? But no matter what it's named, as long as he could coax his fiancée, what would a little sacrifice for the little Qilin matter? Huang Yueli heard his compliments and her mood indeed lifted up. Especially when she saw the little Qilin bearing a pitiful expression as though it was about to faint, she felt especially pleasurable. HMPF, who asked you to go against me? There hadn't been any spiritual pet which hadn't been dealt with by this sister. It was the same for a spiritual pet. Huang Yueli ravaged little Qilin for a moment more. Li Moying saw that little Qilin was just too pitiful and finally gave it a little sympathy as he carried it away. Huang Yueli already had enough fun, so she didn't make any resistance. He looked at Li Moying caressing little Qilin and suddenly, she seemed to have recalled something as she revealed a shocked look. Right, this little thing doesn't like me but likes you so much. Could it be that you're the descendant of this cloudy Qilin clan? Li Moying was stunned. Why would you think in that way? Huang Yueli was originally just letting her thoughts run wild and just spoke her mind, but being counter-asked by him, the more she thought, the higher the possibility she felt it was true. Don't you feel that things just happen too coincidentally? You're of the thunder attribute, and earlier when we were at the secret room entrance, that Qilin's virtual image could not even hurt you. Doesn't that mean that your thunder attribute innate talent is so high that it's enough to conquer the Qilin spiritual beast? But why do you have this kind of innate talent? There are only that many practitioner families in Soaring Heaven's continent, but none of their innate talents are comparable to yours. Don't you think you're very ridiculous? In the past I didn't understand, but now thinking of it, it is possible that it's because you're a descendant of the Cloudy Qilin clan. The Cloudy Qilin clan rears Qilins, and that already shows that the most powerful genius in the clan must have innate talent which could suppress the spiritual beasts in order to make them submit. If you have Cloudy Qilin clan's blood, then it is understandable for you to have such innate talent. Moreover speaking, my Wang Kai also mentioned that the bloodline in you is extremely powerful, so much that even he feels fearful. She slowly recollected her memories, feeling that all the bits and pieces of the puzzle were linking the same truth. However, after Li Moying finished listening, he shook his head. This is merely your imagination. It's virtually impossible to ascertain how it is in reality. Why is there no way to ascertain? Huang Yueli pointed at little Qilin in his arms. Doesn't this little thing here not know anything? Li Moying shook his head immediately. Little thing's age is too young. It said that it had just been born for a few days and was sealed here immediately. I've attempted to interact with it earlier, but it doesn't seem to know anything at all. It only said that the thunder attribute on me is extremely powerful, making it felt a sense of familiarity, hence it made a contract with me. Isn't it obvious from what the Qilin said? What's called familiarity. This little Qilin had never left the Cloudy Qilin clan's turf since birth. Only Cloudy Qilin clan's clansmen would let it feel familiar, isn't it? You can also listen on. Li Moying frowned slightly. Huang Yueli could tell that he was wavering as she immediately added, now that we're in the historical ruins of Cloudy Qilin clan, perhaps we might be able to find some evidence to prove your bloodline. If you're really a descendant of the Cloudy Qilin clan, then perhaps there is some inheritance within the mystic region which only you will be able to get. Just like the inheritance which I obtained in the inheritance tower. Huang Yueli was exhilarated as she spoke, apparently very excited and couldn't wait to tug Li Moying along to search for the inheritance. However, after Li Moying heard that, he replied in an expressionless look, "Lear, I think you might have mislooked a very important matter. If I'm really from the Cloudy Qilin clan, then you're from the sacred phoenix race." Huang Yueli blinked as she asked puzzledly, "What do you mean?" Li Moying replied, "Although we do not know what deep feud there is between these two clans, but even Cloudy Qilin clan's Qilin doesn't want to see you. If we manage to go to God Realm one day, won't the two of us be separated?" Huang Yueli went into a blank for a moment and started smiling. "I saw. You still say I'm thinking too much. I think you're the one who thinks too much. It's still too early to say if we can ascend to God Realm. In your past life, haven't you spent several decades of time but still unable to break through to the 10th stage realm?" But, she suddenly bared her sharp little tiger fangs as she gave a crafty smile. "If there's really someone who wants to separate us, what will you do?" Li Moying looked at his little fox's smile as his heart shook and pulled her into his arms. He leaned in close to Huang Yueli's lips and gave a deep laugh. "If there's one such day, then we'll elope. What do you think?" "Elope? It seems so exciting, eh?" Huang Yueli smiled sweetly. Li Moying couldn't help but leaned over and kissed her on her lips. Little Qilin was clamped in between the two of them as it struggled furiously, using its short nails on its little claws to scratch against Li Moying's arm, but was totally unable to stop the intimacy between the two lovers. As there was no one around and little Qilin had no beast rights, so Huang Yueli didn't act as coquettish as usual as she stretched out her arms and circled it around Li Moying's neck, obediently accepting his demanding kiss. The two of them had never thought that Li Moying's casual words would be realized one day in future. After a long time, Li Moying finally released the young lady in his arms. Huang Yueli's face was flushed red as she rolled her eyes at him. "Carry your Kai properly. I'm going over to take a look if we've left out any treasures." She made a round in the secret room and discovered several bottles of 8th grade medicinal pills as she kept it away carefully. Turning back, she discovered a small notebook in Li Moying's hand as he was flipping the pages, reading it. She curiously leaned close to him. "What are you reading?" Li Moying was reading as he replied, "I found a notebook underneath the rug and it talks about some things to pay attention to when rearing a Qilin." Huang Yueli heard that and hurriedly replied, "That's great, there's actually a guide for rearing. Quickly keep it properly and adhere strictly to what the notebook says. Don't even let Kai be nurtured into a picky eater, and lack of manners is a no-no, especially disrespecting its owner." As she was saying that, she gritted her teeth as she recalled that disobedient little Wang Kai. Luckily she had stuffed him into the Sky Phoenix ring. Otherwise, if a phoenix entered the Cloudy Qilin clan's turf, he would turn the sky around. Li Moying laughed as he shook his head, keeping both the little Qilin and notebook away. You can also listen on. After verifying that nothing valuable was left, the both of them left the secret room. There were at least 180 rooms in the cave dwelling, but Li Moying and Huang Yueli were people with extremely high sight, so after they ransacked the most valuable treasures in the room, they weren't interested in the leftovers and couldn't be bothered to waste any time to enter room by room to check. The minute they reached the cave dwelling's entrance, Huang Yueli effortlessly activated the array as the both of them walked out together. Outside the cave dwelling, there was no sight of Green Cloud's sex disciples anywhere. Thinking of it, it seemed that they knew they had no more chances to enter, so they had all dispersed. "All right, now where shall we go?" Huang Yueli turned her head back as she asked. Li Moying thought for a moment before replying, "We've basically taken a look at the eastern part of the Mystic region, so why not? Let's go for a tour around the west side." Huang Yueli had no objections, and the both of them set off towards the west side of the Mystic region. 7 days later. 7 to 8 eye-piercing light rays flashed past in the sky, and a 7th-tier blood feather eagle was struck consecutively by the light rays, giving out a miserable shriek in mid-air as it fell head-first onto the ground. Huang Yueli kept applauding, "Moying, you're just too amazing. Too handsome and suave. Now can I go and dig my ores?" Li Moying nodded. "There shouldn't be any danger, so come on over." Huang Yueli hurriedly ran over as she retrieved some tools from her space and started scrapping on the mountain wall. At this moment, a bright white light flashed across the sky from a distance away. The white ray disappeared in an instant, but the area where the white light had appeared caused streams of uninterrupted white smoke. When Li Moying saw this, his body immediately turned stiff. Lear, something seemed to have happened. Huang Yueli's back was facing him and she had not noticed the white ray flashing by as she turned her head back in astonishment when she heard that. "What's the matter?" Li Moying pointed to a distance far away. "Did you see that? That's celestial light sex flare signal. Further from the color of it, it seems to be Jian's flare signal. He must have met a life and death crisis." Before entering the cloudy Qilan mystic region, Sect Master Murong had given each direct disciple a piece of signal flare. It was given so that if they met with a life and death crisis in the mystic region, they could ask for timely help from their same sect members. But Huang Yueli always had her suspicions regarding the usefulness of this kind of signal flares. Because if they were to meet with danger, it would be pretty good if their same sect disciples didn't try to scheme that person, so how many of them would risk their lives to save another person? Moreover, to waste their time seeking for opportunities in the mystic region. Even Huang Yueli herself would not go save someone who wasn't related to her. So ever since entering this place, Huang Yueli had specially collected the signal flares from MOE and the rest of the practitioners whom she was closer with, remodified it and redistributed it back to them. Those signal flares which had been remodified by her, when lit, would be different from ordinary signal flares. By the smoke, they could easily differentiate who was the owner of the signal flare. Huang Yueli followed the direction of Li Moying's finger and her expression changed immediately. "That's right, it is indeed junior brother Luo. What on earth has happened to him?" Li Moying replied. Jiyun had set his heart on experience learning properly. If it wasn't some life-threatening situation, he wouldn't light up the signal flare easily. Looks like his situation is precarious, so I must immediately head over now. Huang Yueli nodded her head. "All right, the matter cannot be delayed any further, let's head over now." Li Moying heard that and his footsteps halted. "You're going along with me?" You can also listen on. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.